I'm Katherine Celli, and my background is in a large enterprise change, whether it be strategy and operations or within the people world. I have been doing kind of a combination of enterprise change in these areas over the course of my career for about 2 decades.
You and I have chatted a little bit about how your career sort of started more in consulting and operations oriented roles. I'm really curious about what kind of drew you into more people centered work. And then how did your experience in that operations world really help prepare you for work as a people leader?
My experience in consulting and leading large strategic and operational changes was really the best experience I could have had in order to make me an effective people leader. I've always been drawn to how complex systems work and the thrill of figuring that out. And as it turns out, working in the people space is absolutely no different. Sometimes I find it harder with people because you can have a process and figure that out and it will work the same over and over. But with people, it's always a little bit different every time, depending on who you're working with. Through my operations and strategy work, I realized that really the best design processes cannot deliver results unless people feel valued, involved, equipped, and really connected to the purpose behind the work. And this realization is really what pulled me into more people centric roles.
You mentioned this idea of like change taking hold, and I'm curious because you have had such experience in these large enterprises. What do you think about cultural transformation in large decentralized workforces? Like, what makes that uniquely complex compared to other work segments?
Cultural transformation in a decentralized company is uniquely complex, really, because culture doesn't travel evenly across environments. When you think about large decentralized environments, you're often working with thousands of employees over different shifts, over different locations and geography, and under the leadership of different leaders, and they are experiencing the company in completely different realities, which inherently makes alignment much harder than through a centralized corporate environment where everybody is in one location. I find that you can't rely on a single channel or a town hall to drive culture transformation in a decentralized organization. You must intentionally build the voice of the employee into your culture strategy. That insight has to come directly from those populations, whether they're at a computer all day, barely checking email, or interacting with customers constantly. Truly, if you miss what those employees see as strengths and challenges, your culture plan is not going to resonate or drive change, and it's going to feel really disconnected from their day-to-day reality. And given what a large portion of the workforce decentralized employees often represent in these companies, they're the majority of your business. So it's really important to get that feedback right and to bring them along in your culture strategy. Finally, I always try to remember when it comes to hearing about culture experience from decentralized populations and within those organizations, you have to remember their perception is reality. Because in decentralized organizations, culture is experienced through the leader closest to you, whether it be your supervisor, your manager, your shift leader. Different leadership styles, different tenures, different geographical norms, they create a wide range of experiences. Therefore, the work really becomes creating shared clarity and meaning across these environments, while also leaving room and flexibility for the unique context of each and perhaps what works best for the need of each team. So it's a very delicate balancing act.
You mentioned a few different, ways that you think about helping to transform culture given those constraints. I'm curious just generally what your experience has kind of taught you about supporting this distributed workforce and like how it looks as a people leader to support your deskless employees versus that corporate workforce.
The approach on this is, I think, vastly different. So supporting a frontline workforce has taught me you really have to be intentional about how you engage, communicate, and connect. Like we talked about, the frontline deskless employees are experiencing the organization through their daily reality. So it may be through customer interactions and feedback, equipment they're using day to day to do their job, relationship with local leaders on site and their teams on site, and less so through centralized email or intranet posts. I find if you really want to support kind of these decentralized frontline workforces effectively, it's incumbent on you to show up in their world. And really what I mean by that is meeting people where they are. It's about listening directly to their perspective, understanding the constraints they operate under every day and their challenges. And it really requires different tools and often more in-person presence to build that trust and capability. So relying on digital channels that corporate employees might naturally use typically won't cut it for these decentralized workforce population. You really need to be purposeful about how you share information, reinforce, and also gather feedback to make sure that it's landing. And do so in a forum where you can meet frontline employees where they are and really work on that two-way communication where they can engage with you.
You mentioned the role of that local leader a few times, and so I'm wondering if you could maybe share a little bit about, how critical you feel that role is, and then how you as senior people leader can kind of help to empower or mobilize those frontline supervisors. There's only so many times you can be, in person to capture that feedback. So how do you help ensure that local leaders are also doing that work continuously when you might not be there?
The buy-in of local leaderships is really make or break for culture initiatives, I find. And especially that work of the frontline supervisor. It's absolutely critical to have that audience engaged and on board and equipped with the tools they're going to need to drive change, drive discussion in order to get the results that you want. Of course, culture is everybody's job, but frontline supervisors are the ones who are translating the organizational intent into daily reality. And given that they are just the closest connection point to frontline employees, that makes them inherently critical and influential as culture carriers in decentralized environments. When I think about what they need to be successful, I think about three main things. One is giving them clarity. The second is giving them capability. And the third is giving them support. So starting with clarity, it's essential that as the foundation that expectations are set as to what leading culture looks like in their day-to-day work, from behaviors to performance management to how to show up in an operational environment, how we interact with each other. Being clear on what good looks like is essential to go any further, right? Then capabilities, when I talk about capabilities, I'm talking not only about investing in their leader training from a technical perspective, which is often really key and of top focus in frontline and decentralized workforces, but also investing in their training for leader development. And these are more of those soft skills that maybe supervisors didn't have before when they were frontline employees. They include things like interpersonal skills, coaching, and communication that are really going to be fundamental to their leadership foundation to lead with impact. And lastly, giving them support, right? So support means giving them access to feedback, resources, leaders, the ability to ask questions, get answers, giving them tools, whether it be playbooks, cheat sheets, checklists, like anything that they need to help expedite that process of learning and help them to engage with their teams in meaningful ways. And while we're talking a lot about supervisors, I just want to be really clear that, of course, they can't do it alone, right? So the tone has to be consistently set. I would say from the top leaders in the company to really every layer of leadership, everybody's got a responsibility in creating a culture with intention. And you've really got to surround these supervisors with that tone from leadership equally at all levels. Another thing I find really helpful to help with culture transformations and supporting the supervisors, where often they've got so many direct reports coming into them that it's just hard to keep up, is really identifying those culture ambassadors across the business and the different parts of the business. And what I mean by that is these are people in the workforce who model the behaviors you're trying to build and who the culture really resonates with them and they want to be part of shaping it and upholding it. I think making them a natural extension of the supervisor team, the culture team, having them as your advocate, your eyes and ears, really brings a sense of support to the supervisor who is trying to do so much.
Really sounds like the key there is just making sure folks feel really supported and like there are these different tools, resources. And I love the idea of these like cultural ambassadors that they can sort of lean on to help shoulder that load, because it's quite a lot.
Absolutely. All about the network, even internally to the company.
oftentimes when we think about building culture, it can sometimes come at odds with or in partnership with this sort of balance of business performance, and especially in industries where there might be uncertainty or we might be going through a period of volatility or uncertainty. How do you sort of balance that need to, okay, we've got to drive for business performance, but at the same time also really need to like support and inspire our employees during this time too? How do you balance those two things or hold both of those things as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like navigating uncertainty is just a part of all of our jobs these days. I feel like every time we turn around, there's another unprecedented event that we're going through. You can't separate the business from how people feel because your people are your business. Organizations that navigate uncertainty best are the ones where leaders can create clarity, connection, and stability, even when the answers may not be perfect yet. So when the employee is feeling supported and informed, I find that it removes a lot of the barriers that cause them to get pulled away from staying focused on that core of the business and the business work that needs to be done. So for me, the balance really comes from being transparent with what we know, honest about what we don't know, and really consistent with how we show up as a leader. Of course, you hold those performance goals really firmly, but you create space for people to process the change, to ask questions, and to really feel seen. And part of a bigger community as all this change continues to unfold around them.
I love that idea of transparency and honesty, like transparency about what's happening and honesty about what we don't have answers for and can't solve for, and like building that community. How do you think organizations can really like maintain that trust and momentum when things are constantly changing? Is it about reinforcing that communication? Is it about being really visible about like the community that you're building for your employees?
When the future feels uncertain, people really look for stability through their leaders. Communication absolutely becomes critical in my experience. It's got to be more frequent. It's got to be more honest. And it has to be genuinely two-way, is what I found. People are looking less so for those town halls where it's just like information coming at you, especially when the answers are clear, and more towards being able to ask their questions in dialogue about the maybe uncertainties that are happening and how to deal with big change in the business. They're looking for space to ask questions and really feel heard. And the dialogue, again, going back to this idea of reducing the noise and keeping people connected to the business and to what matters. Leader presence, I would say, matters just as much as communication. And what I mean by this is being available, accessible, and really willing to engage proactively. In uncertain times, I find there's a lot of quiet cues from workforces, and maybe they'll say something, but what's scarier to me is when you're on a call and it is just dead silent and nobody's saying anything, and you know that there are thoughts, but there are nonverbal signs, right? There is nonverbal energy in the physical room or the virtual room, of people, and that tells you kind of who needs support, and to go further into that, to understand and be really attuned to what that audience might need. And above all, I think underpinning all of this, both how you show up and the communication that's happening, is transparency.
It kind of goes back to what you're saying about soft skills, and also like making sure that every layer of leadership is really attuned to those quiet cues and knows like, no, that's when you act. It's when people aren't asking questions. That's when you should dive in and make sure they have what they need. Final sort of like question I have for you today is really like, for those leaders who are looking to spark meaningful change in their own organizations, what's one piece of advice you would give a leader kind of, in a similar situation in a complex organization, where to start when it comes to cultural transformation?
Cultural transformation can often feel overwhelming when you think about the fact that you really need all of your workforce to model the behaviors and the culture you want to see. One piece of advice I would give to every leader looking to make a change in their organization is not to mistake small changes for insignificant changes, and really to focus on small and consistent actions. Leaders often look for big and symbolic moves. Guilty in the past, absolutely. But meaningful change is really built in the everyday moments. For example, how you're communicating, how you show up, how you listen, and how you follow through. Lastly, I would just say that culture is shaped by thousands of small choices in not one big initiative. So every person, regardless of their level, has the ability to influence the organizational culture through their presence and through intentional presence. And when you model the behaviors you want to see consistently, the organization will start to follow.
That's great. And I appreciate you sharing that and sharing your perspective. I can tell that you've had like a depth of experience really helping to build and shape cultures in a meaningful way. And so a lot of what you've said here, I think will really resonate with people and hopefully really help people who are trying to do the same. Like really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you taking some time to share your experience with us.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure and such a passion. So happy to do it.